My daughter-in-law told everyone. I was missing while I was sitting in the next room, eating my afternoon snack. Can you imagine that? The audacity of that woman still makes my blood boil even months later. But wait, let me tell you what happened next, because that was just the beginning of her schemes. Within hours, she had convinced half the neighborhood that something terrible had happened to me, and by the next morning, she was already meeting with lawyers about my house, my own house that I had lived in for 43 years. Hi, my name is Patricia Coleman, and I am 80 years old. I live in a comfortable 3-bedroom house in Sacramento, California, that my late husband Robert and I bought back in 1982. We raised our only son Daniel in this house, and I watched him grow from a little boy playing in that backyard to a successful accountant. Robert passed away 7 years ago from a heart attack, and since then it has just been me in this house surrounded by all our memories and photographs. I worked as an elementary school teacher for 35 years before I retired at 65. I taught 2nd grade, and I loved every minute of it, even the challenging days. After Robert died, I thought about moving somewhere smaller, but I just could not bring myself to leave all those memories behind. My son Daniel married a woman named Jessica 5 years ago. From the very first time I met her, something fell off. But I kept my mouth shut because Daniel seemed happy, and who was I to interfere in my grown son's relationship? Jessica was always pleasant enough to my face, but there was something calculating in her eyes. She worked in real estate and was always talking about property values and investment opportunities. At family dinners, she would walk through my house touching things and making comments about how much space I had and how the location was so desirable. It made me uncomfortable, but again, I said nothing. Things started getting strange about 8 months ago. Jessica began visiting me more, frequently always asking questions about my finances and my plans for the future. She would say things like, "You are getting older. Patricia, have you thought about what will happen to this big house when you cannot manage it anymore?" Or, "Patricia, you really should think about moving into a senior community where people can look after you." I would smile politely and tell her I was perfectly fine managing on my own, thank you very much. I had my neighbor Doris, who checked on me daily. I had my book club every Wednesday. I volunteered at the library on Thursdays, and I was in better health than people 20 years younger than me. My doctor always said I had the constitution of someone in their 60s. But Jessica would not let it go. She started bringing Daniel into it too. The two of them would sit me down during visits and express concern about me living alone. Daniel would say, "Mom, we just worry about you in this big house by yourself. What if something happens?" And I would remind him that I had a medical alert system. I had my cell phone, I had neighbors and friends checking in, and I was perfectly capable. But I could see Jessica whispering in his ear, planting seeds of doubt about my capabilities. Then one Tuesday afternoon in October, everything changed. I had gone upstairs to take a nap after lunch, which was something I did most days. I was not feeling ill or anything, just a bit tired, and a nap always refreshed me. I went up to my bedroom, closed the door, and settled in for what I thought would be peaceful hour of rest. I must have been more tired than I realized, because I slept longer than usual. When I woke up, it was nearly 5 in the evening, and I could hear voices downstairs. Lots of voices. I got up feeling a bit groggy and opened my bedroom door. That is when I heard Jessica's voice coming from downstairs, loud and dramatic. "She is missing. I am telling you, something terrible has happened to Patricia." I went completely still on the landing listening. I heard Doris, my neighbor, saying, "But Jessica, her car is here. Her purse is on the kitchen counter. She cannot have gone far." And then Jessica saying, "Exactly. That is why I am so worried. She would never leave." Without her purse, something is wrong. I started walking down the stairs, and I could see into my living room. There were at least a dozen people there. Doris from next door, Tom from across the street, my friend Margaret from book club, and several other neighbors. And there was Jessica, standing in the middle of my living room with tears running down her face playing, the part of the concerned daughter-in-law. Daniel was there too, looking genuinely worried, pacing back and forth. Jessica was saying, "We need to call the police. We need to organize a search party." And that is when I reached the bottom of the stairs and walked into the living room. "Excuse me," I said, "but what exactly is going on here?" You should have seen the look on Jessica's face. It was not relief or happiness to see me safe. It was shock and something else. Anger maybe. Frustration. Her whole face went white and then red, and her mouth opened and closed like a fish. Everyone else rushed toward me, asking if I was all right. Where had I been? They were so worried. I explained calmly that I had been upstairs taking a nap in my own bedroom in my own house. Was that somehow a crime now? Doris laughed with relief and hugged me. Tom said, "Well, that is a relief. We were about to call the police." Margaret said, "Jessica was convinced something terrible had happened to you." And I looked directly at Jessica and said, "Well, as you can see, I am perfectly fine." Jessica stammered out something about how she had called my name and knocked on my bedroom door, and I had not answered. I told her I was sleeping, and I am a sound sleeper, always have been. She said she had tried my cell phone. I said it was on silent in my purse downstairs because I do not take it upstairs during nap time. Daniel came over and hugged me, clearly relieved. "Mom, you scared us," he said. I patted his back and told him there was nothing to be scared of. I was just sleeping. Everyone started leaving after that, satisfied that I was safe and sound. But Jessica lingered, and I could see her brain working, calculating her next move. After everyone left, Jessica said to me, "Patricia, we really need to talk about safety measures. What if there had been a real emergency, and you were upstairs, unconscious, and we could not reach you?" I told her that was what the medical alert bracelet was for, and I was wearing it as I always did. She looked at it on my wrist, and I could see the frustration building. She said, "This house is too big for you to manage. Alone, what if you fell on the stairs? What if something happened in the night?" I was getting irritated now, and I told her firmly that I was 80 years old, not an invalid, and I would appreciate it if she stopped treating me like I was incompetent. She left shortly after that, but not before, giving my house one more long look that made my skin crawl. Daniel apologized for the fuss and said, "Jessica was just concerned about my well-being." I told him I appreciated the concern, but maybe Jessica could express it without creating neighborhood panic attacks. Over the next few weeks, things seemed to calm down, but I noticed Jessica was still circling. She would drop by unannounced and let herself in with the spare key Daniel had given her for emergencies. I would come home from the library or from grocery shopping and find her in my house going through my mail or my papers. When I confronted her, she always had an excuse. "Oh, I was just checking to make sure you had paid your utilities, Patricia. Or I wanted to see if you needed help organizing your paperwork." I told her to stop coming into my house when I was not home, and I asked for the key back. She said she would give it back, but she never did. Then one morning, I woke up to find Jessica in my kitchen at 7 in the morning. She had let herself in and was making coffee like she owned the place. I asked her what on earth she was doing in my house at 7 in the morning. She said she wanted to talk to me about something important, and she thought it would be better to do it early, before I got busy with my day. I said, "Jessica, I do not appreciate you letting yourself into my home without permission, regardless of the time." She ignored that and sat down at my kitchen table, pulling out a folder of papers. "Patricia," she said, "I have been doing some research, and I really think it is time for you to Consider signing the house over to Daniel. I stared at her. What did you just say? She repeated it, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Sign the house over to Daniel now, while you are still healthy and competent. That way, when the time comes and you need to move into assisted living or a nursing home, everything will already be arranged, and there will be no legal complications. I asked her what made her think I was going to need assisted living or a nursing home anytime soon. She said, "Well, Patricia, you are 80 years old. These things happen sooner than you think, and it is better to be prepared." I told her absolutely not. This was my house, mine and Robert's, and I had no intention of signing it over to anyone while I was still alive and living in it. She started arguing, saying it was the smart thing to do financially, for tax purposes, for estate planning. I told her I had an estate plan already set up with my lawyer and everything was in order. She asked who my lawyer was, and I refused to tell her. She got angry then and said I was being stubborn and unreasonable, and I was going to make things very difficult for Daniel when the time came. I told her to get out of my house and not to come back unless I invited her. She left, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. I called Daniel that afternoon and told him what happened. He sighed and said, "Mom, Jessica is just trying to help. She worries about you." I said, "Daniel, I need you to hear me on this. I am not signing my house over to anyone. This is my home and I am staying in it for as long as I am able. And when the time comes that I cannot live here anymore, I will make those decisions myself." He said, "Okay, Mom, I understand. But can you at least think about what Jessica said about estate planning?" I told him I already had everything planned with my lawyer, and he would get the house when I died, as per my will. And that was the end of the discussion. But it was not the end for Jessica. She started a campaign to convince everyone that I was losing my mental faculties. She would tell neighbors that I had forgotten to turn off the stove, or that I had gotten confused about what day it was. None of it was true, but she was planting seeds of doubt. I would hear through Doris that Jessica had been going around the neighborhood expressing concern about my memory and my ability to live independently. It made me furious, but I did not know how to fight it without looking defensive. Then came the incident that I mentioned at the beginning. It was a Thursday afternoon in late November. I had come home from my volunteer shift at the library, and I decided to have a snack and watch my afternoon game show in the den. The den is a small room off the kitchen toward the back of the house. I settled in with some crackers and cheese and turned on the television. I must have dozed off in the chair because the next thing I knew I was waking up to the sound of voices in my living room again. I checked my watch and realized I had been asleep for about 2 hours. I got up and started walking toward the living room, and that is when I heard Jessica's voice trembling, with fake emotion saying, "I am telling you she is missing." I came by to check on her, and the front door was unlocked, but she is not here. I have looked everywhere. Her car is here, her purse is here, but Patricia is gone. I walked into the living room, and there was Jessica with Doris, and Tom and Margaret, and a few other neighbors. And this time there were 2 police officers. Jessica was saying, "We need to organize a search. I am so worried something has happened to her. She has been acting so confused lately, and I am afraid she might have wandered off and gotten lost." I said loudly from the doorway, "I am not lost. I am right here." Everyone turned and stared at me. The police officers looked relieved. Jessica looked like she had been slapped. One of the officers said, "Ma'am, are you Patricia Coleman?" I said, "Yes, I am, and I live here, and I have been here the entire time in my den, watching television and apparently napping." The officer said, "Your daughter-in-law reported you missing. She said she had searched the house and could not find you." I looked at Jessica and said, "The den is right off the kitchen, Jessica. You know where the den is. You have been in this house dozens of times." Jessica stammered that she had checked the den and I was not there. I said, well, I was there, and I have been there for the past 2 hours. So either you did not actually check, or you are lying. There was a terrible silence. Doris looked uncomfortable. Tom was frowning at Jessica. The police officers exchanged a glance. One of them said, "Well, ma'am, it appears there has been a misunderstanding, but we are glad you are safe." They left after taking a few notes and reminding me to keep my doors locked. After they left, I turned to Jessica and I said, "Enough. I know what you are doing and it stops now." She tried to look innocent and said, "Patricia, I do not know what you mean. I was genuinely worried." I said, "You were not worried. You were trying to make me look incompetent and confused. You have been trying to convince everyone that I am losing my mind so you can push me out of my own house." She started to protest, but I held up my hand. I told her I wanted my spare key back immediately, and she was no longer welcome in my home. Without an invitation and my explicit permission, Daniel showed up about an hour later, clearly upset. "Mom, what is going on?" "Jessica is very upset. She says you accused her of terrible things." I sat him down and I told him everything. I told him about Jessica letting herself into my house without permission, going through my papers, pressuring me to sign over the house, spreading rumors about my mental state, and now twice staging these missing person incidents to make me look incompetent. Daniel looked troubled. He said, "Mom, I think you are misinterpreting Jessica's concern." I said, "Daniel, I am your mother, and I am telling you the truth. Your wife is trying to get me declared incompetent so she can get control of this house." He did not believe me. He said, "Mom, that is a pretty serious accusation, and I think you are being paranoid. Jessica loves you, and she is just worried about your safety." I felt my heart break a little. My own son was choosing to believe his manipulative wife over his mother. I told him fine. If he did not believe me, then he could leave and he could tell Jessica to stay away from me. He left looking angry and confused. The next week, I got a call from Adult Protective Services. Someone had filed a report claiming that I was living in unsafe conditions and that I might be suffering from dementia or other cognitive issues that made me unable to care for myself. I knew immediately it was Jessica. A social worker came to my house to do an assessment. She walked through every room, checked my refrigerator, asked me questions about my daily routine, my medications, my doctor visits. I answered everything calmly and clearly. I showed her my medication organizer, which was perfectly maintained. I showed her my calendar, where I tracked all my appointments and activities. I gave her my doctor's contact information. The social worker was very nice, and at the end of the visit she said, "Mrs. Coleman, I have to tell you that you are one of the most organized and competent 80-year-olds I have ever met. Your house is clean and safe. You are clearly taking good care of yourself, and I see no evidence whatsoever of cognitive decline or inability to live independently." I asked her who had filed the report, and she said she could not tell me, but it was a family member. I said, "I know exactly who it was, and I appreciate her time and her thorough assessment." After she left, I called my lawyer. His name is Martin Chen, and he had handled Robert's estate and my will. I told him everything that had been happening with Jessica. He listened carefully, and then he said, "Patricia, I think we need to take some protective measures." He suggested several things. First, he had me sign a durable power of attorney for healthcare, naming my friend, Margaret, as my agent instead of Daniel. Second, he suggested I consider changing my will, or at least adding some protective language to prevent Jessica from contesting it. Third, he recommended I start documenting everything Jessica did, every visit, every conversation, every incident. I followed all his advice. I started keeping a detailed journal of every interaction with Jessica. I told Doris and Margaret what was happening and asked them to be my witnesses. I had Martin draft a letter to Jessica and Daniel informing them that I was mentally competent, as confirmed by my doctor and by Adult Protective Services, and that any further attempts to have me declared incompetent or to interfere with my living situation would be considered harassment. Jessica did not take it well. She called me screaming, saying I was being cruel and unreasonable, and I was going to regret pushing her away. I told her calmly that I had simply protected myself legally from her schemes, and if she wanted a relationship with me, she could start by respecting my autonomy and my home. She hung up on me. Daniel called later that night. Mom, he said Jessica is really hurt. I said, Daniel, your wife has been trying to steal my house out from under me. She has filed false reports. She has staged incidents to make me look incompetent. She has violated my privacy and my boundaries repeatedly. I am done being nice about it. He said, I still think you are overreacting. I said, fine, Daniel. Then you are choosing your wife over your mother, and you need to understand the consequences of that choice. We did not speak for 3 weeks. It was the longest I had gone without talking to my son since he was born, and it hurt terribly. But I was not going to back down. Then in early December, something happened that changed everything. Doris came over one morning very excited. Patricia, she said, you are never going to believe what I just heard. Apparently Jessica has been having an affair with her boss at the real estate agency. Someone saw them together at a hotel in San Francisco, and word got back to Daniel. I was shocked. Doris said Daniel confronted Jessica, and she admitted it and said she wanted a divorce. I did not know what to feel. Part of me was sad that my son's marriage was ending. Part of me was relieved that Jessica would be out of our lives. And part of me was angry on Daniel's behalf that this woman had betrayed him. Daniel called me that afternoon. Mom, he said, his voice broken. I am so sorry. You were right about Jessica. About everything. She just admitted to me that she was planning to get control of your house one way or another. She said if she could get you declared incompetent, she could pressure me to sell the house and split the money. And if that did not work, she was going to wait until you died and then contest the will, claiming you were not mentally competent when you wrote it. I felt vindicated, but also heartbroken for my son. I told him to come over. He came that evening and we sat in the kitchen, and he cried and apologized. He said he should have believed me. He should have seen what Jessica was. He was so sorry for choosing her over me. I held his hand and told him that love makes us blind sometimes, and that I forgave him. Jessica moved out of their apartment the next week. Daniel filed for divorce, and as part of the divorce proceedings, all of Jessica's scheming came out. Daniel's lawyer subpoenaed her emails and found messages between Jessica and her boss where she talked explicitly about her plans to get control of my house. There were emails where she discussed how much my house was worth and how she could force me into a nursing home. There were texts where she laughed about staging the missing person incidents. It was all there in black and white. Daniel was horrified and disgusted. He gave all of it to my lawyer, Martin, who said we could potentially file charges against Jessica for fraud and elder abuse. I thought about it long and hard. Part of me wanted to see her punished for what she had tried to do, but another part of me just wanted her out of our lives forever. In the end, I told Martin to write Jessica a letter informing her that I had all the evidence of her schemes, and that if she ever contacted me or Daniel again, or if she ever tried to contest my will or cause any other trouble, I would file criminal charges and civil suit against her. I also demanded that she sign a legal document relinquishing any claim to my estate. Jessica's lawyer contacted Martin within days. She signed everything. She agreed to stay away from both me and Daniel permanently. The divorce was finalized 3 months later, and Jessica moved to Los Angeles. Good riddance. Daniel and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. He was ashamed of how he had treated me, and I had to reassure him many times that I forgave him and that we would be okay. He is more careful now about the people he lets into his life. He comes over for dinner every Sunday, and we are closer now than we have been in years. I am still in my house, the house I shared with Robert, the house where I raised Daniel, the house filled with 43 years of memories. I am still volunteering at the library, still going to book club, still living independently and happily. I will be 81 next month, and I have no plans to go anywhere. The whole experience taught me some important lessons. It taught me to trust my instincts when something feels wrong. It taught me to stand up for myself, even when it means standing alone. It taught me the importance of having good friends and good legal counsel. And it taught me that sometimes the people who claim to care about you the most are the ones you need to protect yourself from. I also learned that I am tougher than I thought. At 80 years old, I faced down a manipulative, scheming woman who was 30 years younger than me, and I won. I protected my home, my independence, and my dignity, and I did it all while maintaining my grace and my principles. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where someone is trying to take advantage of you because of your age, do not back down. Get yourself a good lawyer. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And do not let anyone convince you that you are incompetent or incapable when you know in your heart that you are just fine. As for Jessica, wherever she is in Los Angeles, I hope she learned something from all of this, though I doubt it. People like that rarely change. But she learned that this grandmother is not someone to be messed with. Now I want to hear from all of you wonderful people watching this. Where are you from? Comment your city below. If you love your grandma, or if you are a grandparent yourself who refuses to be pushed around, let me know in the comments if you have ever dealt with someone who tried to take advantage of you or a loved one because of age. I read every single comment, and I love hearing your stories. And if you enjoyed hearing about how I stood up to my scheming daughter-in-law, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because I have plenty more stories to share from my 80 years on this earth. And share this video with your friends, especially if they have elderly parents or grandparents who might need to hear this message about protecting themselves. Remember, you are never too old to stand up for yourself, and you are never too old to fight for what is yours. Stay strong, stay independent, and do not let anyone tell you what you are capable of. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I will see you in the next video.